Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. "I can make your son walk again," said the beggar. The millionaire froze. In the upscale neighborhood of Beverly Hills, beneath a brilliant blue sky, stood the sumptuous Monroe home. Glass walls reflected the sun, revealing a minimalist, modern interior, where every object seemed to have been chosen with meticulous care. The impeccably manicured garden stretched out in terraces, dotted with elegant palm trees and babbling fountains. It was a place where opulence met perfection, a bubble isolated from the hustle and bustle of the world. At the heart of this fortress of success lived Elizabeth Monroe, a formidable businesswoman whose name echoed across the glass towers of Los Angeles' skyscrapers. By 45, she had built an empire in finance and real estate, and her reputation as an enlightened philanthropist had earned her respect and admiration. In her tailored suits, she embodied power and elegance. Yet, behind this facade of confidence and success, a deep wound gnawed at her day and night. Her only son, Nathan, had been the victim of a terrible car accident 3 years earlier. That day, Elizabeth's life had changed dramatically. The 9-year-old boy she knew, brimming with energy and innocence, had become a child confined to a wheelchair, a prisoner of his own body. Since then, Nathan had not walked. Every morning, Elizabeth woke with the fragile hope that today would be different, that a miracle would break the heavy blanket of pain. She spent her days juggling corporate meetings, where she led with determination, and charity galas, where she wore her polite smile to mask the fatigue. But most of her hours were spent in medical appointments and rehabilitation sessions, always searching for a solution, a breakthrough that would bring the light back into her son's eyes. Despite the best specialists' efforts, despite technological innovations and experimental treatments, each new attempt had ended in bitter disappointment. Doctors spoke of a plateau, of medical limits, of accepting a different life. But Elizabeth refused to give in. For her, Nathan would walk again. One summer afternoon, when the weight of the day seemed to weigh heavier than ever, Elizabeth felt an urgent need to escape this vicious circle. She put on a light coat, styled her hair, and left her gilded villa to venture into a more modest part of Los Angeles, far from the glitter, the flashes of the paparazzi, and the smiling faces of the guests at her high society parties. She wandered through the bustling alleys, where modest shop windows rubbed shoulders with the colorful stalls of a flea market. There, life beat to a different rhythm, that of ordinary people, hard workers, wounded souls like hers, but also souls full of hope. As she walked through the aisles cluttered with second-hand goods, old books, and costume jewelry, a raspy voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Madam, please, a coin, just a coin for a poor old woman," the woman murmured in a broken, almost pleading voice. Elizabeth froze. She looked deeply into the eyes of the beggar, a woman in threadbare, stitched-up clothes, whose faded color seemed to absorb the sunlight. The old woman's face bore the marks of a hard life, deep wrinkles, leathery skin, and a dark spot near her left temple. Yet her eyes, a light, almost translucent blue, shone with a strange, almost supernatural intensity. Elizabeth gently removed a bill from her wallet and placed it in the beggar's trembling hand. The feel of the rough skin on hers gave her an unexpected thrill. But instead of lowering her eyes or leaving, the old woman stared at her intensely, as if probing her soul, trying to unlock a secret too heavy to bear alone. Then, in a hoarse but resolute breath, she articulated words that resonated in Elizabeth like a distant echo, a whisper from elsewhere. "I know what you're looking for, Mrs. Monroe. I can get your son walking again." Time seemed to stand still. The sounds of the market faded, replaced by an almost sacred silence. Elizabeth felt her heart race, her fingers tightening around the strap of her handbag, as if to hold back the mingled anxiety and hope. How do you know that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if saying the words aloud might upset some fragile balance. The beggar inclined her head slightly, her piercing gaze never leaving Elizabeth. "I see what others won't see, or can't see. What I'm going to offer you has nothing to do with hospitals, machines, or medicines. It's a difficult path, strewn with trials, where faith, courage, and sacrifice will be your only guides. A wave of doubt washed over Elizabeth, mixed with a strange fascination. Despite herself, a glimmer of hope grew within her, fragile but stubborn. "What should I do?" she finally asked, her voice trembling, her throat tight with emotion. The beggar woman sketched an enigmatic smile, which fleetingly illuminated her tired features. "Follow me tomorrow at dawn, to the old city cemetery. There, I will reveal the way to you." Without waiting for an answer, she turned away slowly, melting into the passers-by, leaving Elizabeth frozen, her gaze lost in the place where she had just disappeared. The next morning, as the first faint glimmers of dawn barely filtered through a gray, overcast sky, Elizabeth slipped a light coat over her elegant dress. The cool wind bit at her cheeks, reminding her that this place held nothing familiar, nothing reassuring. She had spent a restless night, haunted by the beggar's mysterious face and her enigmatic words. Yet, an inner force had driven her to rise before sunrise, ready to face this stranger. The old cemetery stretched out before her, shrouded in a thick mist that rippled between the ancient tombstones, their shapes worn by time. The engraved names seemed almost erased, and the rusty iron crosses cast long, eerie shadows on the damp ground. The air was heavy with humidity and a mingled scent of freshly turned earth and wild grasses. Through this almost unreal atmosphere, Elizabeth glimpsed the familiar figure of the beggar woman. Sitting on a weather-beaten wooden bench, she held at her side a small, dark, ornate wooden box, its surface marked by the years. The old woman looked up at Elizabeth, and a soft but solemn smile lit up her wrinkled face. "You came," she said simply. Elizabeth, her hands sweating despite herself, sat down opposite her, her heart pounding. "What I am about to offer you is an ancient ritual, passed down from generation to generation," the beggar explained in a low voice, almost a whisper. "This ritual transcends reason, it lies beyond the tangible, in a world where the mind and heart must be fully open." Elizabeth nodded, trying to contain the trembling in her hands. The beggar delicately opened the box. Inside lay a few deep green dried herbs, a brilliant white eagle feather, and a small heart-shaped amulet, carved from dark, smooth, and polished wood. "Take this," she said, handing the amulet to Elizabeth. "Every night at midnight, you must burn these herbs while holding the feather in your hand. As you do this, recite the words I am going to give you. But above all, open your heart to healing. Send your son pure, unconditional love. Power comes from this faith, from this energy that you will be able to transmit to him." Elizabeth felt a lump form in her throat. Everything inside her resisted believing in this improbable mystique, and yet, an irrepressible spark of hope was born. That night, in the solitude of her room, Elizabeth performed the ritual with the precision dictated by the beggar. The fire in the small burner exhaled a sweet, fragrant smoke that filled the room. The quill felt light in her hand, like an extension of her soul. The words, hesitant at first, gradually became a song, a breath, a prayer. Every night, Elizabeth repeated this ritual, despite the fear that sometimes gripped her, despite the doubts that assailed her. But each time, she sent Nathan, through this act, a deep, pure, unconditional love, that of a mother ready to do anything to see her son back on his feet. And little by little, in the silence of those mystical nights, something began to change. The weeks ticked by slowly, punctuated by similar days, as Elizabeth continued her nightly ritual with almost religious fidelity. Yet nothing seemed to change. Nathan remained silent, his eyes sometimes filled with painful resignation. The house, despite its luxury and comfort, was filled with a silent sadness, an expectation that weighed on every breath. Elizabeth sometimes felt her hope flicker, like a fragile flame in the wind. On days when disappointment overwhelmed her, she withdrew into herself, fighting a sense of helplessness that threatened to engulf her. But each time, her son's face returned to her, and she returned to the ritual with greater strength and faith. Then, one morning like any other, as the sun was barely rising, a small miracle came to break the monotony. Nathan, usually calm and resigned, sat up abruptly in his wheelchair. His eyes, wide open, stared at Elizabeth with a new intensity. His voice, timid and hesitant, broke the silence. "Mom. I feel something in my legs." Elizabeth's breath caught. She knelt beside him, taking his cold hands in hers, trying to believe that fragile promise. The next day, Elizabeth took Nathan to the doctors, whose looks of surprise and hope betrayed their astonishment at this unexpected progress. Thorough examinations were conducted, and everyone agreed that, although slow, Nathan's recovery was real and inexorable. The first few weeks were marked by immense effort. With the help of dedicated physiotherapists, Nathan took his first steps. At first, he wobbled, his legs trembling under his body weight. Each movement required extreme concentration and fierce willpower. But each small step was a victory, a triumph over silence and pain. Elizabeth watched this progress with a mixture of wonder and humility. The beggar, in her mystery, had kept her promise. What had begun as a simple hope, a glimmer of hope, had turned into a profound life lesson. Elizabeth understood that her money, however immense, was no match for the power of will, faith, and that invisible magic of small things: love, patience, perseverance. She found her son, not only standing, but stronger than before, his eyes shining with that new strength which is born from overcoming trials. As for the beggar, she had disappeared as she had come, a fleeting shadow in the tumult of the city. But she left behind a scent of hope, a breath of miracle, which would continue to inhabit hearts long after her passing.